Scott, thanks for coming and being with us. Just want to, again, remind you the series that we're doing right now, these conversations is all a part of something called Heard. And the goal of Heard is that we as a church, Wildwood Church, might be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And so what are things that we might not normally think about, hear about? What's another perspective that we need to hear as it pertains to the subject of justice? Now, I recognize also that we are taking an oversimplified definition of justice. And so what I mean is this, justice is just giving people what they deserve. And the two sides of that are the punitive side and the restorative side. Punitive, you do something wrong, you gotta pay for it. Restorative is really where the scripture spends the bulk of its time. How do we restore justice or bring justice, seek justice on behalf of people? And almost always it involves restoring the dignity of man to him. So God made us in his image, the Imago Dei. And so what does it look like for the church to pursue justice on behalf of the world? So that's what the series is. That's what we're talking about. And so this conversation here. So before we dig in, I want just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you've been, how'd you get here? Sure. Just ever so briefly.
Yeah. I am, I guess I'll start with the vocational piece of it, but I'm a lawyer. I'm also a certified mediator. So I both advocate on behalf of clients and I resolve a lot of legal disputes. I probably resolve in any given month, maybe 15, 20 legal disputes. But I've also been an advocate. That's been practicing law for about 20 some years, and mainly in the employment law arena. So I deal with a lot of disputes between employers and employees. Background, married to a beautiful wife, Scott Callen, and two wonderful sons, 15 and 13, Bryce and Taylor. So I'm a father on top of that. I mediate a little bit of disputes at home from time to time and advocate, but I tend to lose. And then quick background. I have an interesting background in my sense about how God shaped me to be here today with the vantage point I have. My dad was in the military. He was in the Air Force. So he had a very unique perspective on there's rules. And if you break a rule, you got to pay the consequences of it. But he pushed excellence. He followed like the military structure on how you do things. My mother was a school teacher. Both from different perspectives. My dad helped with minority recruiting in the late 1960s for the Air Force, so kind of a pioneer in that arena. My mother worked at different schools, from the top tier schools in the suburbs to the schools in more urban settings. Was going to go to thinking about becoming a marriage and family therapist. Decided I probably had a little bit more advocate role in me. And I ended up studying psychology. Long story short, picked between law school and marriage and family therapy, ended up as a lawyer, and was really interested in the employment context because it involves people. And you see real life people, real life situations come out in the employment context because that's where people spend the majority of their time.
Is it true that at the time, not your wife, who became your wife, Krista, at the time, is it true that in college she almost had to basically ask you out?
Yeah, she did. I think I was interested in her. I guess I called a newbie Christian. I was taking a religion class, and I was asking one of her friends about this girl that I saw in the gym, who happened to be her sorority sister. She told Krista, and I was very much afraid to ask Krista out because she had big socks on. And she was a cool aerobics instructor. And I thought there's no way she'd be interested in me. I'm not sure what the rules of the game are for Christians on how to date. So she said, "Are you ever going to ask me out?" And 22 years later, I'm here. So yeah, I was a shy guy. Obviously, I don't mind talking. We've done men's groups together, but I had a hard time speaking with women. And my wife, if she had never asked me out, I don't think I would have been married to her to this day. So it worked out well.
Good. All right, so I want to talk about this aspect of law.
In
there. So let me start on the one side, but I really want to ultimately get to the mediation side of it because I think there's a lot of things that we as a church it would be helpful to hear.
Yeah.
But let's start on the advocate side. Explain to us even just in general. I mean, I think when most people think about justice, immediately what comes to mind is law.
Yes.
It could be written laws. It could be laws that need to be changed, et cetera. It could be when laws are broken, then what happens through the system, I think. So you're in a field that it's an easy, that's where we immediately go. Explain to us just in general terms, how does lawyering work?
Yeah, lawyering is, I would say, bifurcated or segregated into different, where justice may play out. I'd say there's attorneys and legal issues that I see and feel more the sense of justice, like, maybe you're advancing some law about marital rights or abortion on either side, one way or another. Or something that's more a collective sense about justice for numerous people, numerous rights. I see probably more justice being advanced or advocated in that setting. There's times in what lawyers do, which is representing a client or defending a client, something that's not you're going to see in the news, where there's justice that is being pursued, and I think that's a good thing. Somebody may be injured, somebody may be discriminated against, a company may be unfairly accused. So justice does play out. But I'll be frank with you, in the day-to-day piece of the law, you don't hear the word justice come out too much. Not with lawyers, at least. Sometimes, and every lawyer, to some degree, uses justice in some form or fashion with whatever position they're trying to advance. But I think it's somewhat of a lost concept in the day-to-day practice of law.
And why is that, you think?
Unless you're talking about a criminal issue, you really resolve legal issues just by money. And money is the best way. I think society has decided that's how you would restore justice or provide justice when somebody's rights have been violated or somebody's been injured. But there's great lawyers, and there's lawyers that make a lot of money and pursue and exact justice. But the legal arena, I don't want this to be indictment on lawyers or the legal system, but it's like anything else. When money is the main arbiter or the end line, you end up talking more about money and having people want more money or pay less money. It becomes money, not so much justice. Now, sometimes the money equates to justice, but at the end of a lawsuit, usually a jury awards an amount of money, and they don't say this is for justice, but that's money's how it resolved. But most cases settle before you get to a court of law. And so in the settlement agreement, it says one party pays the other party a certain amount of money, and it doesn't say for justice. It says to resolve the dispute, and usually both sides say, I'm not acknowledging I did anything wrong. So there's not a sense of justice because no side says I did anything wrong, and both sides still disagree with each other. They're just figuring out for a business reason or a personal reason why they'd go about resolving the issue. So it's more money is the economy, not justice as the economy.
Would it be fair then to say this field, which is a noble field?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a good. It's good to practice law. That's at the heart of God. Would you say, hey, your encouragement, young men and women right now, guys, high school, college, thinking about, would you say, let the whole field of law, we need Christians to flood the market?
Yes, we do. Yes, we definitely do. We need Christian ethics in the practice of law. We need a sense of justice. I think that's lost to some degree. I'm not saying it's completely removed, but I believe it's lost. But I'll say this much. There's a lot of great attorneys, and some of them, they're doing it for the right reasons. They might be successful financially, but they're also doing it for the right reasons. So if I was to mentor somebody, say, about the practice of law, I would say you could go into it. I wouldn't, if you're going into it for the money, that brings into a different equation, but there's avenues to restore justice or protect justice. You might not get paid as much. There's also ways where you can be an attorney, and if you sue a lot of companies, you might change a whole way society does things. If you defend against it, you might be able to defend and protect certain rights. So yeah, there's a lot of good. I think in the last 20 years since I've been doing it, I want to say some of the good has waned. And I'd like to see some more good be injected back in.
Like to be restored.
Restored, yeah. I'd like to see justice become more of the final outcome in some form or fashion.
Good. Before I ask you a couple of specific scenarios, talk to me about mediation, just the process in general. Help us understand what that is, and even why it sounds like it's become a joy of yours.
Yeah, God worked somewhat of a miracle in my life. Without bragging or sounding like a billboard, I thought I was successful as a lawyer. So I won't say I wasn't. I just think God shaped me to be a mediator. But mediation to me is I'm able to work with people of two different sides of a legal issue. And so what mediation does is I get hired to come in and listen to two sides who both think they're right and both think they have been the victim of an injustice. And both come into me telling me why they're right. And I don't make the decision about which party is right or wrong, but I help them work through a process that by the end of the day, they are agreeing to resolve a lawsuit. And it takes a lot of different skill sets. I have to take off my advocate role. And I have to understand how different parties and how different facets of life, how they think and how companies think and how individuals think, how somebody who's indigent, how they might think, an African-American, company CEO, an insurance company. I have to be able to understand a variety of different contexts, a variety of different viewpoints. But ultimately, I hopefully, and I've had this happen, have a lot of people at the end of the day say, thank you for helping us resolve this lawsuit. We didn't think we could get there. And it's usually the interesting thing about mediation to me. I talked a lot about money being the driver, but what I found with mediation is money's a piece of it. It equates to something, right? If you can't know what exactly is nobody's going to jail, then the money has to equate to some piece of justice. But more times than not in mediations, when I'm trying to help both parties hear each other, understand it, understand their issues, what's in conflict, what they have in common. More times than not, it's a resolution that's not about the money, which has been fascinating to me. So
there's a couple things in there that stuck out to me. One is you said you felt like you have to put aside the advocate side when you're going into mediation. And then what I kept hearing is I've got to understand this perspective.
Yes.
And I've also got to understand this perspective.
Correct.
I mean, when you look at justice-related issues in our day and age in America, in there, and I won't limit you in your thinking. I just say, but when you think about justice-related issues, man, help us as a church, because when I turn on TV, I don't see this network and this network trying to understand the perspective. I see this paper and this paper. I see sides.
Correct.
In there to help flesh this out for me.
Yeah, I think the mediation process. Now, every mediator has a different style. Okay, but but the process I think is somewhat common about how we get to resolving disputes. So. I think it could be taken and used and transitioned to a more collective sense. So I'll just walk through how I go about mediating a dispute and why certain components are important and why society or our church, how that might be beneficial in a transformative way, how to deal with some of today's issues where there's disputes and injustices. The first thing I think is vastly or critically necessary to a good mediation is both sides, there's a level of confidentiality in mediation. It's a confidential process. Now, what you see in society or on the news, that's not confidential, or a dispute at the family table is not confidential. But my point about it is what the confidentiality allows for, it's a vehicle where both sides can speak freely. They speak freely to me. And they're not talking with the other side. I'm the mediator. And so they talk freely, and anything they want to say to me, it doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be wrong. They have an opportunity to tell me their side of how they see things. Some of it may be even they might say something and say, I don't know why I said that, or but I needed to get it out. So there's a dialogue, a free dialogue piece. When I say free, a freedom to speak freely without being demonized or put in some kind of threatened by what you're saying. So that's important. I think if we take that piece and move it forward into society, the ability of people or church members to talk about different perspectives and different sides of the issue without being castigated or demonized or almost like they're a leper if they have us hold on to a certain viewpoint, one way or another. I think that would be transformative. So I see today where there's parties and times where one party or like I'm using this in the collective general society sense or even a church sense, they can advance a certain position, but the minority position feels like they can't say something or advance it without repercussions. I think it's vital to have the dialogue. Now, that's common in any kind of restorative process. You go to marriage and family counseling, that's what they're going to want to do, get both sides talking. But it works also in a sense of where you have two parties that feel like there's an injustice committed. You have to be able to speak freely. So in the context I'm using, if you go into an injustice that's in our church or in society, parties or people have to be able to speak in businesses in a way where they don't feel like there's an immense amount of repercussions that will come their way for saying it. Now, I'm not saying they can get away with anything they want to,
Sure.
but they need to have some kind of open forum. That would probably that's a big piece of it. So the other part to it is, I think it's very important for mediation, and this is what I do. I don't want to let up all my business secrets, so to speak, but I think this would be important because you don't see this that much in any kind of debate or any kind of dispute. Even if you're having a dispute with a spouse, you rarely see this, but it works almost all the time. When I get into a mediation, the first thing I usually do is recognize a person's perspective who's telling me about what they're telling me. Even if I might personally disagree with it, I still recognize how they see it that way. And I acknowledge it. And I say, I understand how you could draw a certain conclusion from that. And that has been probably, when I talked about what makes a difference in mediations and how to resolve conflict and injustices, just the ability to say, I understand how you see it that way. I don't even have to say I agree with them, just the acknowledgement. And it probably works in like a spouse, like if Krista and I were ever have a dispute, if I would simply say, I get it why you see it that way, that would help her. It would help me greatly. When my kids, if I have a dispute with them, I get why you see dad in that light. It applies the same way in society, but that's a vital piece of mediation. And then sometimes, like anything else, I don't want to make this too utopian sounding or life is just a bunch of peace and we're all going to break bread and have wine together. But there's a piece of mediation where there's reality components where I talk about justice. Like here's where the law here is what the law says, or here, like you might not agree, but this is what I think the law would hold. So they have to embrace a certain sense of reality. But there's also, here's how other people, even though you see it this way, here's how other people might see it. And I have to talk to them about that part of it. And then another piece that works, and probably get back to your justice piece, which when you were talking about what we deserve, the thing that works in every resolution is that people actually have to, I might tear up here, they actually have to give up what they deserve in some respect. Not everything, but any resolution, any mediation I handle, I start off with, if you want to resolve this issue, you're going to have to compromise in some respect, which that's a legal or negotiation kind of term. But if you apply it out broadly to broader scales, you have to give up life to gain life in a sense. So you have to give up some of what you deserve to maybe bring justice. Not all the time, but a lot. That's a big common denominator.
I cannot help being a pastor I know you've had this thought many
Right.
times on your own. I cannot help but think, in how many different ways did you just describe Jesus?
That's why he's known as the great mediator. Yeah.
Yeah, the mediator between God and man, that Jesus not only tried to understand our perspective, he became one of us. He stripped himself of his glory. He came down and he endured the cross. He stood the scorning shame. He entered into skin so that he might and he gave up his very life so that we might. I can't help but think you have to know when you're doing this that in a way you're a little Christ. I don't mean to say that you do this without flaw, but you have to take joy and satisfaction in that.
That's because I've seen injustice, I've experienced it, and I want to help people get back to a sense of justice, but it takes an ironic kind of twist to it. It takes giving up more life, more of what you deserve to get back to the place where you need to be and should be, and what God calls us to. And that's tough because I've been in situations where I could exact justice. I had more power. I had more leverage. And to know that you have power and leverage, but you could have to give up a piece of it for the greater good or for your family or for the church or for society. Ultimately, I think we're going to have to ask ourselves that question, not how the other side's wrong, but what piece can we give up to bring us back together?
In some ways, we could just end right there. I got a few more questions, but that's rich.
Yeah, I think I think that's what Jesus calls us to. I'm not, this is just my viewpoint. I don't see Jesus as somebody who just says, hey, look, this is the way I see it. I'm okay with how everybody else sees it. We're all good here. In other words, I'm not saying Jesus gives up all of his rights and he just doesn't acknowledge that there's right and wrong. I clearly think Jesus delineates right from wrong. Now, thank gosh he died on the cross for the wrong piece of what we did and what we do. But, there is a right and wrong. He intervened on our behalf. I think we're going to have to, intervene on others' behalves. But I think we also have to understand, even if we disagree with others' perspectives, it's okay to say, I know why you have that perspective. It's okay to ask, why do you have that perspective? And some way along the way, we've got lost on that. There's winners and losers. There's that might be okay with a football game, but when we're talking about big time injustice issues in a church or collectively as a body of people, what can the church do to say, hey, look, we don't have to out leverage you or outpower you to advance what Christ wants us to become. We can hold true to what the Bible calls us to, but it's okay to say, you don't even have to say I disagree, but why? Why do you feel that way? And I get it. And it doesn't really to be honest with you, it doesn't to me always matter why they see it that way. That's how they feel about it. That's how they see it. I don't remember God criticizing David in Psalms for how he felt about his enemies. I don't remember God saying, hey, David, I don't like the fact that you're calling out wrath on your enemies. I don't like the fact that you're criticizing me and asking me where am I in this? I think if you look at Psalms, you see the very point I'm trying to make is it's okay to have a perspective. If it's right, it can be right. If it's wrong, but they're true feelings, and let's get those out. And I think that's what Psalms, at least that's from my layperson perspective, that's the whole point of Psalms, and to some degree.
Yeah.
Let's give other people an opportunity to say, I see it. I understand why African Americans feel that way about cops. Let's give cops an opportunity to say, hey, look, I might be wrong about how I handled that or why I do it, but here's what I see every day. Here's how I handle it. Do you really want me not to be, looking after your life because there's some other cop that was the bad cop? Like, let's ask people why. And let's acknowledge what they say. It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but at least acknowledge it. But if you look at TV and society, it's one out leveraging, one out powering the other. it's not a process of intervening, mediating. How do we resolve the dispute? It's you're wrong, I'm right, I have more power. And ultimately, that's circular and just perpetuates a never-ending spiral into more and more injustice.
Give me an example in your practice. So in other words, my guess is you've had to have at least represented one person in a mediation. You're looking at sides, or even as an advocate. But in your practice, what about somebody that has been truly discriminated against? It could be race, it could be religion, it could be orientation, it could be whatever factors there that which they've been truly discriminated against. What's it like for that individual?
It's real, first of all. I mean, what I mean by that is sometimes I think we read things in the newspaper, see things on the news, and it lacks like the humanity of it, the dignity. Like, I guess to use the dignity word, I've seen people's dignity stripped away right in front of my face. And they see it a certain way, and it's hard for me not to say I didn't see the discrimination too. And so it's hard to hear it. It's hard to hear the N-word. It's hard to hear about nooses. It's hard to be a white male talking to an African-American woman in some ways, and listening to it and hearing it. But I'll tell you, and I know you didn't ask me this question, but I'll never forget a mediation I had in the last month. It was right after the George Floyd incident, and I had a woman who was denied a number of promotions, and she was more educated than the white employees that got the promotions. I'm not saying she was discriminated against. I don't know. But I clearly, let's just say there was a lot of promotions. I understood her point. And all I told her was, I truly, truly understand how you feel discriminated against. And she started to cry, and I started to cry. And she told me, I've never had anybody even acknowledge that, and I don't feel crazy anymore. And there was something about that made all the difference in the world to her. Now, she's just one person. But I don't know if she was discriminated against based on race, but I can tell you the optics, she was not wrong to perceive that. So I've dealt a lot with that. And if you don't mind, I'll interject just so people's society and the church can hear how it plays out in the real world in terms of what I truly hear and see. I hear the N-word a lot. It comes up in employment settings, and I don't know whether it's a lie or fabrication, but I probably hear it in employment suits once, twice, 3 times a month. I hear about nooses. I hear about a lot of discrimination. Again, the businesses and employers, they usually, there can be two sides. Sometimes they tell me it didn't happen or was misperceived. And I can't always say that the companies are wrong either. Like, they have legitimate reasons why they do things. But I don't want the listeners to think that some of the things you read and hear about, like they don't exist anymore. They do. And just so your audience knows, I'm not some huge ACLU liberal person, but I hear them and I see them. On the flip side of it, I've seen people use discrimination as a way to extract money from companies for settlements. And at the end of the day, after the settlement, I've seen former employees walk away clapping, screaming, in celebration that they just pulled one over on the company, and the company had to pay money, and they just used discrimination. I've seen that happen too. I've seen companies and companies, when we use companies and what I do, there's still people that run the companies. Yeah. I've seen people accused that are highly regarded professionals or even Christians. I've seen them accused of being racist. And I think that that's deeply hurtful to them to hear that. I'm not saying they didn't maybe do something or say something that might again be perceived as that, but they certainly didn't have that in their heart, I can tell. And I've seen it wound them. And I've seen them become intractable in a sense of I didn't do it. And so it's a tough process. Again, getting back to justice, let's just say the person or the company is being unfairly accused. You could enforce justice by saying, no, I will defend that no matter how much money I have to pay my lawyers. I will defend against that. That's one piece. There's another piece to say, I didn't do it, but I see how you got to that conclusion. What can we do to make sure we don't run into the situation again? Either one, you can get to justice. There's two ways. I just work on the one where you get before you get to court and the court says who's the right and wrong party.
Which my guess is that's what most people would like. Most people would like to not go to court. They would rather deal with it in a mediation.
Well, yeah, it's expensive, one. But two is you don't ever get out of the injustice box, because the people that hear your case, they might have a certain bias, a certain injustice about one side or another, or more favor. You might get a different outcome in California than you do in Florida, in Atlanta than you do in Panama City. There's people that hear these lawsuits. They come into it with preconceived notions and ideas about life in and of itself. And so, that's part of the gamble that people take. So I try to help the parties understand it's an arbitrary process at times. I'm not saying doesn't get to just results. I think our court systems are good and ethical, very, very ethical, very good. The judges that I've worked with, but they're people, and people have views. And I think it's better to resolve disputes before you turn that over to people, usually, unless sometimes to enforce justice and protect justice, sometimes it's just best to go that direction and to stand your ground. Sometimes that's the best approach, win or lose.
I recognize you're only speaking on behalf of you right now. And This is a guesswork. Okay. This is not data based, but being inside, meaning a lawyer, what would you say is percentage of people in today's day and age? Go back maybe for the last 15 years, say what, in today's day and age, with all that we have available to us, what's the percentage of people that, two questions, that are wrongly convicted of something? So think of it that way, people that get convicted for something they didn't do. But then I want to think also in terms of what, just percentage wise, of the people that may get off for something that they did do. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? I'm asking
the injustice within the system.
Injustice within the system. Again, I recognize you're only speaking on your behalf, and you don't have data in front of you and all that. But just guessing, what would you?
I mean, I'll just say this much: the legal system is a good system, but it has a lot of technicalities about certain legal standards. Like, just take sexual harassment, for example.
Yeah.
A woman can be sexually harassed. If I was to come up to your wife or to a daughter or something, or somebody, I don't know, and I was to say something that was sexually offensive one time. Under the law, that's not sexual harassment. It's one time I said it, because the law requires that you be sexually harassed in a pervasive and severe form. Usually that means in sort of a repetitive, ongoing abuse or harassment, if you will, a hostile work environment. But you and I, if Judith came home to you and said, somebody said this to me, I don't know, it just come up with something sexually offensive one time, that might be sexual harassment to you, but in a court of law, that's not sexual harassment. So I think people at times don't understand sometimes what you and I or other people might talk about as Starbucks as being an injustice or wrong, but there's legal standards about which may lead to an unjust result or perceived unjust result, but they're also there to protect against injustices, to make sure that people don't get unfairly accused or businesses don't get unfairly accused. So there's a lot of technical pieces of the law people don't get, and a lot of legal standards that people don't get. When I say they don't get, they just don't live and breathe it. Like that's why I go to law school. And that's why I'm a lawyer, and there's other lawyers. But that doesn't always come out. You don't always see that there's evidentiary standards and all that. So there's a real possibility that somebody could end up being unfairly convicted or have a verdict against him or her that they didn't do what they did. I don't know. I don't have any great numbers, but I will tell you, probably about 100% of the cases I end up mediating that come to me, probably about 100% of those people and businesses feel either unfairly targeted or somehow subjected to some kind of injustice. I have yet to have somebody come in and say, I was wrong in that situation. I never hear that. All I hear is I'm right and they're wrong. And there's going to be winners and losers. I'm assuming in your question, at times the winner will end up the loser and the loser will end up the winner.
So, and here's why I asked it, because it was leading me to this.
Yeah.
I'm making a statement in this series.
Yeah.
That one of the things that we have to be concerned with is, are we going to be more loyal to an ideology than we are to the scriptures? So in other words, am I going to look at the subject matter of justice, how it applies to me, what God may be calling me to do, et cetera? Am I going to be more loyal to an ideology that I may hold to, whether that's political or am I going to say, I'm going to let the scriptures guide me in this? So here's what I'm asking. It seems to me that too many times we in the church try to take on the posture of, I'm right, you're wrong. And because I have the Bible, so to speak, on my side, then I'm going to hammer you.
Yes.
Et cetera. What can we do? Wildwood Church. We're just focusing right here. What can Wildwood do when it comes to seeking justice? It doesn't mean that we're necessarily changing the entire legal system, but giving people what they deserve. What can we do when it comes to approaching conflict, et cetera? Guide us.
Yeah. All right. So it's getting back to my you need to be able to speak freely. I could give you some answers. I'm afraid to tell you what's really going through my head about what I think might be the real solution. At least have an awareness that there is a different viewpoint. And if you're going to make a comment on social media or to somebody, at least try to couch it in a sort of way that's receptive to another thought, like another view. I think being able how to communicate in a way that signifies a level of openness and entertains other ideas and a resolution just embodied in the own communication. So in other words, if you go onto Facebook, I largely see one person who has the greatest post in the world and 4 paragraphs about why they're right. And then the other person will post another 4 paragraphs about why they're right and the other person's wrong. I'm not saying you don't do that, but maybe try to, instead of I'm right, you're wrong, how about be solutions oriented? What is the solution to the problem instead of I'm right, you're wrong? And there is a right and wrong. I'm not advocating There's not right and wrongs, and there's times to do it and not do it. There's things to say and not to say. There's timing of it. Like going back to Ecclesiastes, there's like seasons of when you raise issues and when you don't. If I was to help a church member, at least be open to the idea is there's other smart people in the world. There's other people that read the Bible. There's other people that might reach a different conclusion. And it's okay to disagree. Like, that's okay. I don't have to shove my position down their throat. And eventually God's going to decide anyways, I would think. So if you're that confident, be good with that. But there's a level of vitriol. There's a level of anger. There's a level of I'm going to outpower you with my arguments. And if you're that right, you don't have to go to that level, is my point. There's a level of confidence that if you're confident in your position, you don't have to say the offensive thing. You don't have to tear down the other person. You can just advance a position and say others might have another view of this. This is how I arrived at mine. I enjoy talking with other people. I enjoy, if I was to help, what is it? I like being around African Americans, and I think they like being around me, and there's not an awkwardness to it. And there's just, you and I talked about the African American guy up at Walmart that we run into. He just likes me and I just like him. Like, it's okay just to be friendly and talkative and open and smile. Like, I guess I'd like to remove some of the anger and the vitriol inside of us. If we could remove some of that, and we can be confident in our positions, but it's okay if somebody disagrees with you. It's all right. They might have a different view. I don't know. Maybe they're just wrong. I don't know. But it's okay if they're wrong. But I don't have this mindset like I have to take my position and shove it down your throat. Now, if I'm getting paid a lot of money to advance a legal position, I'm going to do everything in my power to win. But even in that, I don't carry into it a level of emotion. And maybe it's just me, but I don't carry into it a level of emotion that there's not a person with dignity on the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, they may pray the same prayers. They may just take a different view, but Jesus still may love them just the same. And I try to look at it like that.
What's is very helpful is, so at some level, when we're seeking justice, there comes a time in which we have to fight.
Yes, I believe in that.
And it gets gnarly. In
Yeah.
other words, had we been living, for example, in a different part of the world right now where genocide is taking place, there's a time to stand up and take a fighting position. We're going to go rip the gun out of somebody's hand.
Yeah,
for example,
yeah,
there's a time for that.
I'm in it.
I think more often than not, though, if we're going to seek justice, it would seem to me that your experience as a mediator,
Yeah.
that when it comes to seeing substantive change take place in today's culture in America, it would seem to me that mediation and the principles from that are going to be a much better option than, I just want to see how my political party and my ideology can crush you and beat you into submission, because that just doesn't sound like Jesus.
It doesn't. And I'm going to go on a limb. I don't think Jesus was a Republican. I don't think he was a Democrat. I truly, I don't see Jesus like that. That's not how I see Jesus. I'm fine with people's political views, but yeah, I mean, if you have a political point, you're on a team, you have an agenda, you're trying to advance something, which is fine. That's the political process. But we need leaders in our church, in our communities, in our families, and maybe even in government that are willing to say, you know what, let's at least hear what they have to say. Let's not call them names for it. Let's not demonize them and say that they're stupid or they're idiots or racist or not, let's leave those out and let's try to come up with a solution. Let's go with a solution. It'd be nice if Nancy Pelosi could say to Donald Trump, you know what, Donald Trump, your hair kind of freaks me out. You say a lot of offensive things, but I think we can work together and I get your point on this issue. It'd be nice if a Republican person, and even a Christian at that, could say to somebody else who they disagree with on the left side, we kind of understand your point. Let's see what we can do about that. It's very polarized. It's not about how do we get to a solution. It's about why we're right. And can I say one thing just so your audience doesn't walk away with the wrong mentality? Because my kids will say, this doesn't sound like my dad. But, and this is how I actually practice law as an advocate when I'm in the advocate mindset. I seek peace, and I seek peace, and I seek peace, and I seek peace. But there comes a time where if I feel like God is supportive of the position and it would glorify him, hopefully, I have no problem at times seeking or pursuing war and to win the war. So I am not advocating here that everybody's just right and everybody's perspective is right. But I will tell you that we're in an imperfect world. There'll be imperfect solutions. but we need to listen, acknowledge, pursue a solution, hear what they are. There are times where I think you have to go to war, and a lot of great moments in the world and history would have not happened but for war. We wouldn't have some of the freedoms we have today without war. So there is a time for war. I just try to seek peace and exhaust peace for a long time, as much as I can. And then there comes a point in time where war or seeking justice is the right approach. If you look at Jesus, though, there was many a times he was God. He could have stepped in and squashed the Pharisees like a bug at any second he wanted to, and he didn't. There was many. I don't know if it was Pete. You're the guy. I don't know if it was Peter or somebody told put down. There's a knife or something. I don't know. He put down the weapon, whatever it was. But ultimately, he won the war, and that was to save us. So he won a war, but he was peaceful up until that time of the war.
Yeah, scriptures say he came originally not to condemn the world, but to save it. Mm-hmm. There is a time that he is coming later on. And
yeah.
It will not be peaceful.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
He will come, and he will vindicate all things. So I think you're right. Brother, this is helpful. My mind is spinning. I've got 8 more things to talk about.
I could talk for another 4 hours, but
we'll have to do another time. I'd love to schedule another one because this is rich. But thanks for what you do.
Thank you,
and thanks for coming in and sharing with us.
Hey, I appreciate it. My pleasure. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.